Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McKusick. I have a fascinating episode for you today. It would typically be labeled a short, but it's going to be a long, I guarantee you. Joining me is Matt Simmons. Matt, how you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing great, Ken. Thanks. How are you?
Doing well. I appreciate you taking the time to join us from the UK and talk about something that is absolutely fascinating to me, which is positional spend for the last 14 Super Bowl winners since the 2012 Ravens. And you spent some time putting that together for us in terms of how much the winning team spent at each position.
Yeah, so I decided to look at Sport Track data. This time of year, a lot of people are talking about where you have to spend money, where you shouldn't spend money if you want to win. Tickled something with me, which is that annoys me a lot in real life, which is we don't need to have spurious conversations about this. We have data that we can look at. So I decided to spend some time looking through Sport Track, look at where the winners have spent the percentage of their salary cap, where they've spent their draft capital to build those winning teams, to see if there's anything we could tease out from that as to where the Ravens should be looking to spend their money for 2026 and beyond.
It's very well done. What you show me here, I love this data. It's great to look at. Now to split out those two items in terms of cap for the year, you took a percentage of cap for each. Also, you had the dead money considered separately. So if I look at the percentage of cap for every player across the roster or every position group across the roster, I'm not going to come up to 100%. But if I
No,
add in dead money, I'd be close.
if you add in dead money, you get to what that team spent that year. Sometimes a little under, sometimes a little over if they had cap from the previous year.
Okay, so kind of a cash spend, we would think of it there. So, or not exactly, because cash spend involves, bonuses and whatnot. But anyway, it's a very close approximation of cap usage. You think?
Yeah, as close as I could get. It includes the injured reserve guys on injured reserve. It includes the guys on the practice squad. Anyone who counted towards the cap in that year is in there in their position group. The dead money is a singular block, mostly because there's some teams that had like 40, 50 players they were paying dead money to. It was nuts, and it was not useful at that point to split that all out.
Oh, by position group, you didn't split it.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. It was just there's one player that's interesting, which we'll get to later in terms of the dead money. But the rest of it is mostly small amounts here, there, and everywhere to a lot of guys traded, cut, various ways that dead money can accrue.
All right. Looking at the last 14 years, I think that's gonna basically get by a lot of the arguments about players, about it not being today's game, for example. These are all recent seasons. The game has changed some, certainly since 2012, but hasn't changed so dramatically that you don't still have the highest expected spend at quarterback and maybe the second highest expected spend at left tackle.
Yeah, and I think particularly this year we saw the Seahawks win the Super Bowl with an extremely good defense, a game manager at quarterback, which is the same thing that we saw in 2013 with the Seahawks. It was, Russell Wilson was a game manager, incredible defense. I would argue that's what you saw in 2015 with the Broncos with
Yep.
what was left of Peyton Manning as well. So that blueprint clearly can still work in 2025, 2026. I mean, the Bucks obviously had Brady when they beat the Chiefs, but that was also a supreme defensive performance that really shut down the Chiefs there. So the game has moved a lot, and I don't think anyone would deny that. But this is, we're not going back to the 90s with the running back, fullback. This is recent teams and a blueprints that can still work.
All right, so this is organized a number of different ways, and I have the privilege of working with the spreadsheet there. We're going to look at ways that we can provide this spreadsheet somehow for other people to play with it. But for right now, we're going to go through this data, right, Matt?
Yeah, I'd love to provide that so somebody who's really good at data analyst could look at it instead of me, who's kind of just dotting around.
All right, so you got two measures and they're for each position. I like the way the spreadsheet is organized, that you've got the center position, for example, first here on the list of position groups. That's typically going to be one player or a couple. Now, teams might have had backup interior offensive linemen where it wasn't clear if they were a center guard or whatnot. You're not trying to get that fine with it. The backup center cost hopefully was not really big in any particular case.
No, it was almost non-existent. Sportrack, I used Sportrack positions mostly. I went in and looked at depth charts for inside linebacker versus edge guys. I thought that was the only position that it really mattered massively. SNO backup centers were very small cap hits if they were listed at all. Some teams listed one center and then just guards.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about the center position first. Certainly a lot of interest to people this year with Tyler Linderbaum, still a free agent at this point. Reportedly has very high salary expectations. Seems to have a market that will be interested in him at some level. We don't know if he's going to price himself if he's priced himself too high in that market. But if you look at the Super Bowl winners, it's one of the striking things is none of them spent a lot of money at center.
No, and it wasn't. I had no previous kind of preconceptions coming into this as to what I was going to find. But center is one of the cheapest positions that the teams have gone with throughout these winners. 3 teams really out of 14 have spent a significant cap spend on their centers, and that's just the the Seahawks in 2013 with Max Unger. They had the Bucks in 2020 with Ryan Jensen, and the Eagles in 2017 with Jason Kelce. And none of them are coming close to spending what reportedly Tyler Linderbaum is looking for on the open market in terms of a percentage.
So Tyler Linderbaum reportedly would be looking for something like 7.5% of cap, or maybe even higher than that, maybe 8% of cap even. And the highest that's ever been given to a center is 5.4% of cap by the 2020 Bucks and Ryan Jensen. And then the Seahawks come after that in 2013. So it's, nobody spent a lot on center. But here's the other thing I find really interesting. You got the JJ points for each team in here. Now, you told me your methodology, and I'm very impressed by it, but tell people how you decided what JJ points you would plug in for each of these items.
Yeah, so every player on a team that was on a rookie contract, their JJ points got added so that we could balance out that obviously savings in the cap. So that's the first 5 years if they were a first round pick, 4 years for everyone else. As soon as it was no longer on their rookie deal, those JJ points got wiped out because the team could assign them as a free agent. And then any player who was traded for any picks that were given up to acquire them got added into their JJ points as well. I may have missed some guys who were traded for 6th or 7th rounders in there in the massive things, but I think I got everyone. But the main thing was the big guys, the big trades. We made sure we accounted for that spend.
And it wouldn't be significant, a 6th or 7th round pick anyway. No, but first of all, this is extremely well done. This is exactly how I organize the roster when I talk about value relative to cap. Is players playing for a market value salary, their JJ cost is no longer relevant. Those players who are on their rookie deals and are overperforming relative to the cap are the gold. They're what you need to have on your team. You also need developmental players who might get there still on their rookie deal. But once you're paying market value for a player, all the possibility of really getting a bargain is greatly reduced. I'm not saying it's impossible. The Ravens and Chidobe Awuzie last year would be a good example of a player playing on a bargain contract, but it doesn't happen nearly in the same kind of scope that it does in the first 5 years.
No, absolutely, and it was you, obviously, all the podcasts I've listened to with you that got me to thinking about it this way, to put it together in this manner.
Oh, well, I appreciate that, but you did it 100% the way I would have asked you to do it or talked about doing it with you. Now, let's look at the JJ points at center here, because that's fascinating. The average JJ points spent at center. So there's some teams with veteran centers here, including the 2012 Ravens with Matt Burke, but the average JJ points spent is only 88, and 6 of the teams have 0, meaning they had a veteran center they acquired somehow. Um, not even all of them are real expensive. The 19
Mm,
Chiefs, I guess Creed Humphrey must have been drafted in
he was
20,
in
perhaps.
20, I think, was his draft year, and some of them it could be UDFA's as well, obviously that
Mhm.
come on to be center that would have a zero, um, zero, and they're not necessarily just veterans. It's obviously it's a position that NFL teams have always felt they could pick a guy up relatively cheap, plug him in, and either surround him with better guys, or it just wasn't that important. And certainly the winners, that is what they seem to have done. It's no high picks. So Linderbaum is a huge outlier for the Ravens in terms of a large JJ point spend, high pick. Um, and then if you're obviously fifth year option was never going to be a thing. And then if people want to spend 20 plus million, it's difficult.
Yeah, it'd be a difficult way to go. That just offhand, using the draft tech chart, the 25th pick is worth 720 JJ points. The most any team had is 390 for the 24 Eagles. So
Yeah.
no other team has gone heavy on picking a first round center and done anything with it. And there have been some centers picked in the first round. They just haven't been very good, generally speaking. Garrett Bradbury has been around the league. Price, the guy for Cincinnati, was in and out of the league pretty quickly. It hasn't been a lot of success there.
And even if they're great players, they haven't been enough of a force multiplier on that team to elevate that team. I mean, sometimes players get drafted onto franchises that are historically bad. That's not really their fault, but the centers who've been picked up early either have been picked up by bad teams or just aren't elevating that team in the way that players at other positions highly picked are elevating their teams.
Right. It's pretty clear that's the case. Now, we look forward for the Ravens and their 2026 draft, which they may be making with Tyler Linderbaum, an ex-Raven. Where is the sweet spot from your perspective that they would consider drafting a center?
I looking at this, and I would never claim that this is a Bible of any kind. It's just kind of a rough guide, but I don't think you want to be picking a center above the fourth round. It's to me, it's a place where you can get away with a little bit. That's been shown historically. If you have a good O line elsewhere, we have a not great O line just now, but I don't think drafting a center high is a good idea. I would rather do what some of these winners did and pay a veteran center who's proven, but not pay them anywhere near what Tyler is after or is, and what the league may well think he is worth. I think to give people an idea of a number, the highest number here for Jensen at the Bucks would be just over $16 million in 2026 cap. So that's I would not want to go even that high. I think you can get away with paying much less for a center and probably still build yourself a really good offensive line.
Right. I'd agree with that. The Ryan Jensen contract originally seemed very rich when it came out, and it looks like this might have been in about Jensen's maybe third year with the team or something, where his salary had gotten to a point where his cap hit was more, and
Yeah,
you didn't try and like manipulate that cap. It's however it fell as originally structured in the contract.
it was however it fell on the year.
Mhm.
It was too much work to try and figure out how these contracts work, so it makes sense. Ultimately, the cap isn't a 1 year thing. You say it all the time, but the Super Bowl winning team is a 1 year cap situation. So that's how I looked at it.
Okay. All right. Very good. And I think that's a perfectly reasonable way. We do see that the 6 teams that went in there and have 0 JJ points, which means they had a veteran of some sort in there. They did not have a first contract. Well, no, I don't know that that's true. We
You could
might have
have
had a UDFA in one case. At least the 16 Patriots look like were very cheap and probably on a first contract deal.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, so these 6 teams have identified. Oh, sorry, Max Unger is in there and Jens. So you got three teams that have managed to either get an undrafted guy in a center and won the Super Bowl with him, or have found a very cheap veteran. You've got percentages here: 1.9% of cap, 0.34% of cap, which is ludicrously low. That's vet minimum stuff for the 16 Patriots.
The average cap used at center, the average for Super Bowl winners is 1.92%. That would equate to about a $6 million contract for 2026. $6 million, and that's total expenditures at the position if you have multiple centers.
Yeah, exactly. If you got a backup guy in there as well, who's maybe he's a UFE or he's on a vet minimum, so you're looking at a $5 million contract, maybe $4.5 million contract for your starting center, based on what the last 14 Super Bowl winners have done. That it's probably going to scare a lot of people who are big build the trenches fans, which I think is a good thing to be, but it's you don't want to be paying huge sums of money for positions that teams that have been successful have historically saved. And that's
the other thing, a comment that goes along with that, I think, is that good position coaches are pure gold in the NFL. And so if you have Ledford, an offensive line coach, and you have hopefully the various elements of a running backs coach is good, a quarterback who obviously elevates the offensive line. You have a bunch of missed tackle forced value from your running back and your running backs coach. I mean, if you have these elements put together, should help your offensive line be better than they were. And always, I think it's been true that development of offensive line is better than going out and buying offensive linemen.
Yeah, there's no player exists in a vacuum in the NFL. Like there's so many people that make the offense run. Lamar is an incredible helper to his offensive line in many, many ways. He makes them look really good. You've got Derrick Henry, who can make you look really, really good. We've got the new guy from the Falcons in, who hopefully will elevate the line in a way that Warhop was not able to last year for whatever reason. It's a full picture thing. And the Ravens are spending the money that they have all of Bisciotti's of in the right way there, and going big on the coaching side of things and going big on everything around the building that they can do to put those guys in a position to succeed. It's then about where are they going to allocate the rest of the restrained resources, the cap and the draft, the things that they don't have somewhere approaching infinite of with Bisciotti's wealth, however much his checkbook is willing to go to. That's the key and the thing that I really wanted to look at. And yeah, it seems like center needs to be somewhere that they look for 80% of the player, 20% of the price, as they always say. 5% of the price would be great. If they could do it. It seems to be that.
So the other average that you've got here, the 1.92% is a nice firm number. The JJ points is a little more tricky because some people got cheap veterans, in which case they got a zero JJ cost, but your average JJ point spend. So this is the average of first contract JJ points among all centers, some of whom, 6 of whom I think it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 of 14 who have a zero JJ point cost because they were veterans. But the average JJ point spend is only 88. If I gross that up by 14 over 6, I still don't get a very high number. So I'd be under 200, I think, would be the average JJ cost of the first contract centers on this list.
Yeah, I'm not great with the JJ chart. I had to keep looking all these things up. So I'm not sure where 200 points is, but that's relatively far down there.
Yeah, that's pick. We should do that. 200 points is pick number 78.
Right.
So you're right there. And if the other thing is, if you went with 88 points, which is really, I don't think that's as representative, but the 88 points would be pick 103.
So you're looking at a third, fourth round guy on average talent, if you can unearth a guy that you think you can slot in and coach up over his rookie deal to be a guy who can be the linchpin of that line. I think that's, I don't know if many people out there would be surprised by this. I don't know if this is a surprising result. I think most people would think that center is somewhere that not many teams spend a huge amount of money. It might be surprising just how little teams have spent.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not a sexy position. It's not, you don't see a lot of fan bases every offseason clamoring for the latest center. Maybe this year will be the exception.
People do understand that quarterbacks make more money. I think it's still surprising. 122nd is about, I think, about 4.8%. It might be 4.84, but I'm going to do it real quickly right here. Nah, I have 2 decimal places on this calculator, financial calculator. That really helped. 4.54%. Okay. So you would expect you're going to have to pay your punter and your kicker, but you'd expect if you had even positional spend that you'd spend about 4.5% of your cap on the center position, maybe slightly lower with the share of punter and kicker money that has to be taken out of center salaries. So let's say 4.4% or 4.3%. That number, and that would be for all players at the position, but then you also figure quarterbacks are going to make more. I think people would understand, generally speaking, that big shares from other premium positions would lower that 4.5% number significantly, but I wouldn't have guessed 1.92%. I'll tell you that.
No, I wouldn't have got close to getting that. I would have probably been closer to that 4% number that is just the average. I think that's where I would have thought most centers were, maybe influenced by guys like Kelsey and Jensen who make kind of the guys who make some decent money. But yeah, really surprisingly cheap. And again, coupled with the draft spending so low.
The 2012 Ravens had Matt Burke in the final year of his contract. Matt Burke was one hell of a football player and was a center who almost broke the grading curve for me in terms of how good he was at regularly getting to his blocks and not making mistakes. Not surprising. He's a 6-time Pro Bowler, I believe, in the NFC before he even came to the AFC. And PFF had him as, I think, the 22nd best player in the whole league in his first year with the Ravens, which is incredible. I mean, that'd be true. Probably an overstatement. But still, 1.77% of cap. That's what the Ravens spent on Matt Burke in the final year of his contract.
What a bargain. An incredible deal. And really helped that line from the Ravens, and that was very cheap from 2012 actually across the line. And obviously guys like Burke having a guy that good, that cheap makes such a difference.
Let's move on to the guard position. We got to kind of move a little faster. Obviously, center is very critical with what's happening with Linderbaum and whatnot. But guard, I mean, the Ravens have to find a way to assemble an interior offensive line, probably 3 players that they're going to need to acquire by hook or crook, maybe 2 draft and 1 free agent. Could be the other way around too. But you look at the cap spending at guard, it's not a whole heck of a lot higher than at center. It is higher. On average, teams spent 4.33% of cap. Is that on the combination of 2 positions there?
The 4.33 is yeah, that's the total guard spend. So that's your starting left and right guards and your backups. So halving that to give you kind of something that's more representative, like you would get of the center position. Right. You get an average of 2.17% of cap spent on the guards.
So barely higher than center.
Barely higher than center. The JJ points tell a similar story. It's a little bit higher than center. You've got some teams. Seahawks took a guy in the first last year, for example. But you're looking at an average spend of kind of, so let me that 200 again too. You're looking at 200 JJ points as a kind of average spend, and you've got a first rounder in there as well, and bumping that up. So really going cheap in the interior of the offensive line has been a very successful strategy for NFL teams over the last 14 years.
So the 25 Seahawks have the first rounder?
I believe so. I can find out exactly who that was. I believe he was a first rounder.
I don't know why I'm forgetting either, but I'm sure you're right.
Gray Zabel.
Gray Zabel, of course. Yeah, North Dakota. Okay. So anyway, the total JJ spend, every team spent JJ points at guard. So nobody got away with just like a couple of veteran guards that they brought in, which is another interesting thing that hasn't been a winning strategy for any Super Bowl team. But the Chiefs in 23 came pretty close with just a half of a JJ point spent at the position.
They spent 1 7th rounder in their position group. Everyone else was either UDFAs or veterans. I think that's like a comedy. I think it's the conveyor belt that you want, isn't it? That you're always talking about. You've got your young guys that you're developing, that you're hoping to become starters. You've got your guys who are currently starters who you maybe won't be able to afford to keep. So you need to stay on that conveyor belt. You need to keep adding new guys to the start of it, and you do that through mid-round picks.
Not surprisingly, the Chiefs spent the most in terms of cap. On the flip side of that half a JJ points spent on players there. So the average JJ points was about 200 for each team, which that doesn't really capture it completely, but it wouldn't be too much higher than that. Well, no, I really don't know, because there'd be some UDFA and there'd be some vets, and in some cases this is the JJ points for one player. So now we're back at a position where you have to kind of consider that 200 as the total spend on both positions, with some veteran sprinkled in there.
Yeah, most teams are doing a combination of veterans and guys that they've drafted. So that's what keeps the JJ points down. It'd be either an unbelievable drafting team that could have entirely drafted guards in your room there. If you need 4 or 5 guys at guard, if you manage to get all of them through the draft on rookie deals, man, you'd be GM of the year type stuff. So I think that keeps the JJ points down. But the teams are not investing a huge amount of cap or a huge amount of draft capital in their interior offensive line, in their guard position, in the ways that are, these teams that have won.
So the Ravens have been accused of kind of moneyballing the position in 2025. I always talk about the most important thing you do as a GM is to decide where you're not going to spend money. And it looks like the Ravens might have decided, we're not going to spend money at guard. We're going to try and get by with these young guys and hope for some improvement out of Voorhees and Faalele. They didn't get the seasons they wanted out of probably either player, but they certainly didn't get in total what they were hoping for between the two.
No, and I've seen a lot of criticism of that, but like you say, the moneyballing of it. And like you said, I think you have to moneyball somewhere. You can't pay everyone. You don't have resources to pay and draft high everywhere. And historically, I'm sure the Ravens are much smarter than me and know exactly how much people are investing in all these positions. It was the right move. It was the correct thing to do. Successful teams stay cheap at guard. It just, execution is everything. You can call a perfect play, but if the quarterback throws it straight into the linebacker's chest, then it doesn't really matter. And what we had last year was disappointing for everyone. The coaches, the players, the fans, no one was happy with the outcome of the play of the guards. I'm sure they weren't happy with it either. But in terms of strategically, I think it was 100% the correct thing to do. And I think it's the correct thing to do going forward. Is to continue on it. And you got to work out why it didn't work last year. Either evaluate your guys better or work out how to coach them better. It seems, you obviously can win paying guards. I would never claim that just because the last 14 have won without doing it, that it's impossible. That would be ridiculous. But you look at patterns and you go like, well, successful teams save money here, and yeah, I think they should continue to do it. I think they can just identify what went wrong, fix it, and continue moneyballing guards.
All right.
Upset all the fans.
I really, I know there's a lot of people who'll be upset with that comment, but the truth of the matter is they'll have some cheap guards because they'll be on rookie deals. They may have one veteran on the entire interior offensive line that's making some money. We don't know who that is yet because he's not on the Ravens. I don't think it's going to be Linderbaum though.
No, I wouldn't have thought so.
Yeah. So anyway, we'll see how that works out. And let's move on to tackle and talk about that. That's obviously The point that was made in the blind side was that left tackle is the second highest paid position on the entire team after quarterback. And it's a nice situation that the Ravens are in, that I don't think they have to draft a tackle in 2026. And that's like something that's been hanging over their head kind of about the draft the last couple of years, is that they've really had a need there.
Yeah, you see it when Stanley went down this season, and other two, like what happened to the Chargers. If you don't have a tackle, you're really going to struggle. And what the Ravens have managed to get themselves into this great position of having two guys and a backup kind of ready to go. But what surprised me about looking at the tackles was actually how little teams had spent in terms of money on their tackles. I think the left tackle market now, you're looking at $22-25 million a year kind of AAV. And when we look at these successful teams, the equivalent, cap percentage, only really the Patriots in 2016 and the Seahawks in 2013 come close to spending that kind of money at the tackle position across both tackles, across their whole tackle room. And this could be a function of bad teams draft high up the draft, so they spend a lot of JJ points to tackle, and bad teams have high cap space, so they throw huge contracts at good left tackles. So good left tackles end up playing for teams that aren't particularly good a lot of the time. But I really expected to see more big contracts at the tackle position in the Super Bowl winners, was considering how important it is.
So the cap percentage at tackle is much higher than it is at guard or center.
Yeah.
So it's 7.9. So I think I just looked at 7.94%. So 8.94%. So it's almost 9% of cap is spent at the combination of the two tackles, which is, by the way, is right on the expected of 220 seconds.
Right.
Is 9%. But the really striking thing about these Super Bowl winners is how much they spend in draft capital at the tackle position. Yeah. These numbers are enormous. So
you're drafting guys at the top of the first round. Like you said, the problem the Ravens have had, we don't draft at the top of the first round very often, and tackles go so high. They're so rare. They're so important. And you have the Eagles in 2017 spending 1,826 JJ points at tackle, which is an insane number. Patriots had a first rounder. The Seahawks have first rounders. Both their teams, the 2013 team and the 25 team, both have first round tackles. Bucks had a first round tackle in 2020. Really, the Chiefs have a first round tackle. It's not surprising.
And to remind people of your methodology, that's a first round tackle on their rookie deal. So
on their rookie deal,
a lot is made of the need to hit that quarterback window, and make sure that you win while your quarterback's on your first deal. It's just your moment in the sun to try and win. This tells another story that the left tackle on their rookie deal is critically important as well to hit on.
Yeah, you've got to make the most of that guy. When we're looking at the percentages and say that the cap hits are not that big for tackle, considering how important the position is, how expensive the position is. So these teams are.
Let me tell you about the online cannabis company that's changing the game, Mood.com. They created an entirely line of functional gummies, 100% federally legal THC blends, discreetly delivered right to your doorstep. And here's the best part. You can get 20% off your first order at Mood.com with the promo code RAVENS. Now, I've tried a bunch of their gummies myself. Each one's totally unique. The Sleepy Time gummies knock me out right away. They help me unwind fast, leave me refreshed the next morning. The Epic Euphoria gummies, they're perfect for when your day just isn't going the way you want it to go. What makes Mood special is how they pair the THC with natural herbs and adaptogens. You won't find blends like this at any local shop. They've got gummies designed for focus, relaxation, clarity, even energy, all made from cannabis grown on small, family-owned American farms. No pesticides, no shortcuts, just high-quality weed you can trust. Plus, Mood backs everything with a 100-day satisfaction guarantee. So head on over to Mood.com, check out their amazing selection, and don't forget to use the promo code RAVENS at checkout to save 20% off your first order.
Making a really good use of having a cheap, relatively to talent, cheap tackle room. And that's something that the Ravens actually have quite a cheap. I think they have quite a cheap tackle room. I imagine with Stanley's on a relatively okay deal. He did a nice discount for us compared to what he could have got. And we still got Rosegart, and then obviously Carson Vincent. We don't know what he's like, but Ravens have quite a cheap tackle room just now. I think they're probably looking
8%
not too far.
roughly. They'd be right in the ballpark with these other teams, I think. I'm taking 20 million for Stanley. I'm bumping I'm rolling up another, and Stanley's going to be a little bit more in 26, so it may not, but he's a 20 million AAV guy. And Rosengarten's still on his rookie deal, but he's already probably got some escalators, so he might be at 3 or 4 million right now. I don't really know. And then Vincent, you add another $1 million for a rookie deal. You're probably talking 25 million plus in 26. And so, they're using every bit of that 7.94%, maybe a little higher than that, because of that. And it's an interesting thing. I mean, you can't, it's hard to win with a second contract left tackle in there is what I would kind of gather from this. And there are exceptions. I mean, the 2013 Seahawks had a 14.63% spent at tackle, and the 2016 Patriots had 13.6% spent at tackle. And that's in terms of cap, obviously. So it is possible to win with a big number, but just a lot of these teams have won with smaller numbers.
Yeah, it was again another surprise.
The 2000 Ravens are the lowest on this list at 4.84% spent on their two tackles.
Yeah,
Michael Orr would have been in that group, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure where Kelechi Osemele would have been put in there.
Sorry, give me 2 seconds. I will find out for you because that is important to see where
he put him in guard or tackle. And then Bryant McKinney was the other guy who was on that team.
So Osemele is in at guard on Sport Track. So we have McKinney, Jared, and Michael Orr as the 3 tackles on the Ravens that year, and making up that 4.84% number.
McKinney would have been the bigger number in that, I think.
Yeah. McKinney was 2.65% of the cap that year. Jared was 0.5%, and Michael Orr was 1.69%.
Okay.
So even if you wanted to add Kelechi Osemele in there, as he played tackle for a lot of the year, he was another 0.5%. So you're still looking at 5.34% of the cap. Still very, very cheap, and still the lowest number on this list.
Yeah. It's very interesting. Very interesting. So the 2012 Ravens, we maybe don't think of it that way, but they really won with tackles on rookie contracts. The guy who very frustrating from that era is Jared Gaithler, who would have been 2007 through 10 were his rookie contract years, but there was a player who threw his career away in some really unfortunate ways, and could have been a real player for a while. But in 2008 and 2009, when the Ravens' offensive line was probably at their best ever, Jared Gaithler was a very significant component of it, and suddenly developed an aversion to playing football. It was frustrating.
Yeah. Oh, we've all developed aversions to work. It's just few of us have had jobs as exciting as playing professional football.
All right, well, let's roll on to quarterback position, and talk us through what your observations are.
Yeah, so there was something that I sort of talked with my friends about a while back, which was that no team had really won the Super Bowl having paid a huge amount of cap percentage to their quarterback. This was the whole rookie window, you got to win on the rookie deal kind of thing. So before Patrick Mahomes on his second contract in 22-23, the highest percentage for a quarterback to win was 13.89%, and that was Tom Brady in 2020. And when we look at the QB numbers, you see kind of what you would expect from that narrative, which is a lot of guys on rookie deals. And then also you've got the sprinkling in of Tom Brady doing team-friendly contracts with the Patriots. And you've got late career Peyton Manning also with a pretty nice contract for the Broncos as well. He was 13.3% of the cap, so not a small number, but not huge. The one thing actually I wanted to point out here, which from the dead money, which is interesting. So the Rams in 2021, so they traded for Matt Stafford. They paid him 11.79% of cap that year to be their quarterback, but they were actually paying Jared Goff 13.53% of their cap to play quarterback for the Detroit Lions. So I'm not as concerned about Lamar's cap number. The Rams won by giving essentially a quarter of their cap to a quarterback, one of which wasn't even playing on the team, which is reassuring if we're looking at quite a scary number from Lamar and other teams who've got big number quarterbacks. But the story that you get here is big quarterback contracts do make it harder to win Super Bowls. And that just seems to be the fact. I mean, Patrick Mahomes did it. Patrick Mahomes is a generational talent. Lamar is a generational talent. So maybe the Ravens will be fine. But other teams, you're handing out this money to Tua, or I don't know why he's the only one I can think of right now, Kyler Murray, these guys who are good but not great. The chances of winning are so low.
But we would have put Sam Darnold in that category too.
And, we would.
But the other component of this is the JJ points, and you do notice a lot of teams are cashing in on a quarterback on his first contract, and oftentimes it's a first-year quarterback. Mahomes in 2019 was still on his first-year deal. The cap hit is extraordinarily small; it's under 5%, but it's 1,300 JJ points. And here's the big one: the 2017 Eagles had a number 2 overall pick winning the Super Bowl for them at quarterback, but just 4.76% of cap. That is the great Carson Wentz.
And he didn't even win the Super Bowl for them. Nick Foles won them the Super Bowl.
You're right. Nick Foles on the Philly special, right? So
on the Philly special. So they had all that JJ points on their quarterback, and he didn't even play when it mattered in inverted commas. He got them there. And yeah, so you have Mahomes' 10th overall pick, Carson Wentz, even Joe Flacco was still on his rookie deal, obviously with the Ravens in 2012. So that the Ravens were cashing in on the last sort of throw of the dice on his cheap deal. The fun one, obviously, again, the Rams, the whole F them picks thing that everyone likes to talk about, where they're giving up 2,286 JJ points, along with that 25% of cap to the quarterback position in 21. It's an astonishing investment of one.
That's right.
One position.
That's a great point. Now, if you're worried about paying Lamar, that would be the other team you would point to there. Not just the 20. Yeah, it is an astonishing amount.
Yeah,
all right. Fascinating stuff. The zeros in the JJ point column are much bigger cap numbers. That's the Bucs in 2020 with Brady, the 2 Mahomes years, and the Patriots in 18, which is a late Brady year, right? Yeah, he was still with the Patriots in 2018. Yeah. That was the year they came back against the Falcons, or is that a different one?
I think that was a different one. I think 18 was that the Rams? Was that the last one the Patriots won when they beat the Rams with Goff? Oh, it's really bad. It was only 7 years ago, and I can't remember.
Yeah, I'm having trouble remembering too. All right, no problem. But the quarterback position, some interesting information here, and your major takeaway is it's very difficult to win with a second contract quarterback, period, because of the significant percentage of cap that's going to be allocated to that.
Yeah, that's kind of the big thing. It was the Rams in 2018. The Broncos here with 331 JJ points. That's the Peyton Manning Broncos, but they had Brock Osweiler on the roster as well. So he's the one who's dragging them away from the zero with some points. But yeah, these big cap percentages are, it's really the 3 guys. It's 2 by Mahomes in 22 and 23, and Matt Stafford, Jared Goff combo deal. Those are the only real cap percentage number is near what we're seeing now with what quarterbacks get paid that have managed to do it. Sam Darnold this year, for anyone who's interested, was a 6.02% of the Seahawks cap in 2025. That's how they did it.
So he was. I'm trying to remember. He was acquired and was in the middle of a deal, or was he? Is he a new signee?
He was a free agent, I believe. From he was let go by the Vikings after he sort of collapsed in the playoffs. They moved on to JJ McCarthy, and he signed with the Seahawks, and they moved on from Geno Smith, is how I recall that transaction going down. Worked out perfectly for them.
There you go. Let's move on. Talk about the running back position. Now, I think most people would agree they don't expect the running back to make a whole lot of money, that you can go cheap at running back. What do you make of the findings you have here? And I'll start it off by saying I see the average cap percentage spent at running back is about 3.67%.
Yeah, it's a little bit similar to what people might expect, but there are, I think, more big numbers than you would imagine, and also a lot bigger JJ point expenditure. I think you see quite a lot of second round picks, high second round picks that go into the running back position on successful teams, and there is some investment there. We're looking at an average that's higher than the average for center. It's up from where you're getting at guard, and you're only filling maybe 3 running back spots compared to 4 guards. So you probably got less players to making up that number. Recently, you see quite a low number. So the Seahawks in 2013, they paid 8.21% of their cap to the running backs, and that is pulling the average up. And the Ravens paid 5.52 in 2012. So the older teams are pushing that number up a little bit. And we're seeing the newer teams go cheaper. Even the Eagles in 24, Saquon's deal that year was a cheap.
Yeah. So
year,
that's a highly leveraged deal. So
yeah,
his deal definitely wasn't cheap, but they got it leveraged. That was the leverage year.
The Eagles are causing me lots of problems with this by doing that in their recent contracts. The 24 Eagles appear quite cheap in a lot of ways, when obviously they've got whatever is $500 million in void years or something nuts like that coming down the track.
Right. I seriously hope that the new CBA doesn't have any relief for the Eagles and the Browns that lets them somehow avoid paying the piper for all of the accounting tricks that they've done. They've got to pay for that at some point. And it'd be really unfair to the rest of the league and the rest of the league's fans in particular if they were able to use the dodgy accounting to get through on this. I think they will. I don't anticipate the rest of the league is going to have a tolerance for what they've done over the last 6 or 7 years.
No, you'd think the other 30 teams would club together to make sure that you're going to pay that money and have a few extremely bad years, because you you've exploited a loophole to the millionth degree.
Yeah. So if we look at the JJ point expenditures, though, it's very significant. 454 JJ points is the average. That might even be more than at quarterback. Now, a couple things it shows. Now, the average at quarterback is 627, so it's still higher. But the average at running back of 454 is surprising, because we're way past an era where first-round running backs are common. And so you're mostly talking about guys drafted in the second round, I guess. A lot of these, probably a few in the first round still.
Yeah, a couple of late first rounds. Isaiah Pacheco and the Chiefs is one that comes to mind. I think as well it's pushed up by the lack of veteran running backs. Less teams are spending money on second contract backs due to injury risk, perceived slowing down, drop-offs in production. So teams are on the conveyor belt, just constantly get rookie running backs in and kind of churn through them a little bit. I think that does push up the JJ points. For these guys that you're not signing veterans to the same degree you would be at other position groups. You're using a lot more draft to make sure you've always got young guys at the position. There are some small spends. The Patriots in 2016 only had 42 JJ points at running back, which is barely anything. So again, it can be done. It has been done. The Ravens in 2012 as well. I think Ray Rice was on his second deal. That's Bernard Pierce, I think, making up most of those points for the Ravens in 2012. But yeah, guys who say we shouldn't be paying Derrick Henry are in the same way that the data says that we shouldn't be paying guards, the data says we maybe shouldn't be paying money to running backs. Derrick Henry is a generational Hall of Fame talent, so there's always exceptions to every rule, but there's not been a very successful model to pay running backs big cap percentages, certainly. Constantly drafting second, third round guys has been the way forward. For these teams anyway, the successful ones. Hopefully.
Yeah, even lower than that has worked on some occasions, but you're absolutely right. There's not a lot of good evidence for paying running backs that you'd pull from here. Let's move on. Talk about the tight end position. Now, obviously, the Ravens had enormously talented set of tight ends, and all of their contracts came due at the same time. Mark Andrews is under contract now, but Isaiah Likely is not. Charlie Kolar is not, and Patrick Ricard is not yet under contract. Did you take the fullback separately, or if you had a fullback, would it be included with running backs or tight ends?
The fullbacks were separate. The fullbacks aren't here because a lot of teams didn't have one. It was about half the teams had a fullback, half the teams didn't, and every team that had a fullback had barely spent any money on it. It was the same reason the kicker, the long snapper, and the punter, I didn't include them as well. It was the same kind of reason. No team spent a significant amount of money on them. They were all at the bottom. So fullback was a separate position all by itself. It was all very low spend for the 7 out of the 14 teams that had one on the roster.
I am moderately surprised by how much the tight ends made on these Super Bowl winners. They averaged 6.33% of cap spent at that position. Now, it can be 3 guys, and it can kind of be 2 starters. But if we look at, guard, and that ends up being 4.7, 4.9%, whatever it was, I wouldn't expect a position which has 2 players and is critically important to necessarily be less than the tight end position. But the tight end probably had a few big contracts in there, a few big second contracts, I'm guessing, from this JJ point number.
Yeah, the big contracts loom large here. So the Patriots, you've got four teams with Gronk on them. You've got the three Patriots teams there, and you've got the Bucks. You've obviously then got
Travis Kelce.
Travis Kelce's the other one that everyone will be working out as well on the Chiefs. So you've got 6 out of your 14 teams there with 2 of the absolute star tight ends of the last 20 years making big money. So that pushes up the average quite heavily. Obviously, the Ravens in 2012, Dennis Pitta was on his rookie deal, I believe, and Ed Dixon also on his rookie deal, and that's why they were only 1.68% of the cap.
The lowest of all.
The lowest of all, too. Ed Dixon was a very good tight end. Pitta was obviously a great tight end for very little money compared to some of these guys. And the Eagles tight end as well, Zach Ertz would have been making decent money, I think. So some big name tight ends in this group, which maybe what you take from that is that having a big name tight end really helps you win Super Bowls. And I don't know what Mark Andrews is going to be like next year, but certainly paying him up until this point was a very good investment. Next season, I guess we'll see if he can bounce back on that one. But the Broncos surprised me, actually. The 2015 Broncos have quite a cap hit on tight ends, and I did not for the life of me remember who it was. Yeah, Owen Daniels, Vernon Davis. Yeah. So expensive at tight end is fine as long as you've got a great tight end. Kelce, a Gronk, Andrews, your man McBride, I guess, at Arizona is another guy who's one of the best out there just now. If you've got a real difference maker out there, you can you can do a lot with that. Similarly to wide receiver, I think that's kind of where tight end is falling.
Looks like the total cap expenditures at tight end were kind of depressing the JJ point expenditure. So you had stars on a lot of these teams who are on their second deal, and then you didn't have too much left in terms of JJ points on these players. Only the 25 Seahawks had no, there's two of them. There's the 17 Eagles. That's probably also Zach Ertz on his rookie deal still at the end of it.
Yeah, not a lot of space behind the superstars to have another guy on there. So the teams have obviously worked out, if you've got a Gronk, a Kelsey, a whoever who can be fed the ball on every play that they need to be, that you just go cheap underneath that. Your backup doesn't need to, they're barely seeing the field a lot of the time if you don't run a lot of 12. So yeah, that's the JJ points. The Bucs had a first round. OJ Howard was the Bucs first round pick in 2020 at tight end. He's really the only significant JJ point spend at tight end here in the winners in the last 14 years. As Ertz got as well a little bit, but yeah, they've gone kind of the other way from other positions. They've paid the stars and they've saved in the draft.
Well, fascinating stuff. Let's move on to wide receivers. That's the last offensive group we're looking at. As expected, the cap percentages here are fairly high. The average cap spend is 10.44%. In some cases, you're talking about two starters. In other cases, you're really talking about three. But this is the position group as a whole. What did you draw from this?
Wide receiver was tough because you sometimes have six guys on your roster. Quite a lot of the time you have six guys. And I really, looking at this, I think paying for a star wide receiver is probably a good investment, is kind of but only one guy. Mm-hmm. If you have Zay Flowers, whether or not he's good enough is not really the point. If you wanted to pay Zay Flowers and just have draft picks behind him and maybe a cheap veteran in there as well, I think that's a good way to win. The Broncos, which have the big cap hit here, the 2015 Broncos have 16.02% of the cap. That was Emmanuel Sanders and Demaryius Thomas. Mm-hmm. Were two, and they have a big JJ point as well with 1120 in JJ points. They really had a lot of weapons at wide receiver for what was left of Peyton Manning in 2015. And again, you see big JJ point investing as well. The Eagles, that was in 24 with the trade, obviously, for AJ Brown, and you had Devontae Smith, a high first round pick. He was sixth overall. He was up there. So investing, even the Seahawks, obviously Jackson Smith and Jake, a great player. Investing in one or the other, I think, is probably crucial. You either have to pay a decent amount of money or you need to draft a guy. And it is possible even if you do both, which is quite rare. In what I found was that there's not many positions that you can pay a lot of money and put a lot of draft capital in and these teams and still win Super Bowls doing that.
Right.
There's three positions. Tackle, actually, the Seahawks in 2013, their tackle was draft and contract. The Broncos in 2015 at wide receiver, and the other three were all edge. All teams investing at edge rusher or edge player. So yeah, wide receiver is important. These guys are getting paid for a reason. I don't think I wouldn't want to do what the Bengals have done, which is a terrifying amount of cap between just Chase and T. Higgins. Mm-hmm. But paying your guys, as long as he is that guy, which is true of every position, is definitely a winning formula.
Right. Another, a counter strategy to that would be find a way to have no guy. Find a way to win with no guy. And that's kind of the early Lamar strategy that the Ravens had. The Ravens had their best ever offensive year was 2019. They had a Hollywood Brown, who I guess was a JJ point investment, but they weren't spending any money at the position to speak of. and they had their
No.
3.08 points per drive was the best in team history. It's a you got to find that way to beat the system somehow. And I don't know if the Ravens I can still do it with Lamar in his current state. That is really something. I mean, the notion that the Lamar needs weapons around him is more true than it used to be, given where Lamar is in his career path. I think there was a time where it really didn't matter at all. That Lamar Jackson would improve every other player by so much, and produce a lot of himself on the ground, that it didn't really matter how good the players around him were.
Yeah, I guess the only sort of counter to that is obviously that Ravens team did fail when it mattered against the Titans, and there were some drops in that game.
Mm-hmm.
There were some bad drops. So if the Ravens had invested in a good veteran receiver, would that have been enough that year to take them to the Super Bowl? I mean, you can never know, but I don't think I'll ever forget some of the drops from that playoff game.
Seth Roberts had a huge drop that might have been a walk-in touchdown. That was unfortunate. Yeah. But the first one was on Mark Andrews, and there's no personnel decision that's going to be different based on Mark Andrews' ability to catch that football, because it just wasn't characteristic of him in general. I generally don't like to stray down the they didn't win in the postseason argument, because a lot of it's just so sample size related anyway. That's very difficult to point to. But the Ravens are making changes this year because they're unhappy with the way they performed in the postseason. So I guess it's fair to at least look at it for a moment or two here. Average,
you can never know. Like say you have a superstar wide receiver, maybe he doesn't drop. Maybe he catches the ball instead of Seth Roberts, but then maybe he doesn't make a block, and that results in a
or he attacks a fan, or he
right, yeah, exactly. Gets hit by a bus. This is sliding door stuff. You can never know.
Yeah, there you go. All right. The JJ Point average spend at the wide receiver position 690, so it's one of the highest. It is multiple players typically. But pretty much most of these teams had a guy on the rookie contract. The notable exception is the 2019 Chiefs, who had only 7 JJ points, but the 2018 Patriots had only 7 JJ points also. So in terms of first contract wide receivers, those guys had nobody.
And they had really surprising. I think Tyreek Hill was a very late pick. And certainly, so they had 20.4 points total on the Chiefs, which I then divided by 3, working on 11 personnel. So they spent 20.4, which I think is probably Tyreek Hill, and that was kind of it. Everyone else was a vet receiver. The Patriots had something similar. I mean, the Patriots, I think, famously got by through a lot of the later Brady years with not great receivers. That was kind of he was good enough that it didn't really matter. He really Gronk together. The two, and I mean the Patriots again in 2016, 70 JJ points spent at wide receiver. Very, very small investments at the position compared to basically every other team here. And another Brady team, the Bucs, 240, another low number. So you're looking at really Brady is elevating some very low investment in wide receiver in those teams. But just to give somebody else some props here, Joe Flacco also did not have a particularly high investment of JJ points, though they did spend a bit more on Anquan Bolden, who was huge. So yeah, you can do it if you've got a guy as good as Brady it was, or Mahomes maybe is, or maybe Lamar is. You can go a bit cheaper on receiver. Personally, I'd rather draft guys in the first round and maybe never pay them. Maybe just let Flowers walk, draft the next guy, let him walk, draft the next guy, and never hand out 35 million or whatever it will be a year to a wide receiver. That's not necessarily borne out by this data here, which has some big cap hits. But that's just how I feel that with how much wide receivers now are getting paid compared to even 5-10 years ago, I think that seems sensible, because the top wide receivers in 2015 were not getting the percentage of cap that the top wide receivers are getting now. I don't think you're looking at the same kind of contracts.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. That I think that I'd like to see the Ravens find the positions that they can develop, and I think they until this last year, I think it was offensive line. I think they've done a great job getting a bunch of mid-round picks to play over their heads, mid and late round picks, frankly, to play over their heads at the guard and center position. And they had some notable failures at center, but they also had some good players at center that shouldn't be forgotten. And Matt Skura was, he did some good things for the Ravens in his time there. And the Ravens need to consistently be looking for the where can we save money thing, and the where can they save money is where can we draft well and where can we develop well.
Well, yeah, I think wide receiver every year you look at these wide receivers coming out, and even if there's not Jamar Chase, kind of JJ Jettis kind of superstars, the kind of guys who are sort of somewhere around the 10th best receiver in the league level that you can get in the first round. There's guys coming out every year like that.
Right.
And if you pick one up every 3 years and you maybe you're going to upset some wide receivers by doing that, but that seems to be a better investment of resources, cap and JJ points combined than paying a guy 35 million AAV. And then you're like, okay, well now I need to get cheap somewhere else.
Yeah.
Because we're paying wide receiver, and that I just think there's a lot more really good wide receivers, even if not top 5 guys.
Absolutely fascinating stuff. One of the great conversations of the last couple of seasons we've had on this show in terms of where have the Super Bowl teams really expended in order to win. What's been a winning formula for them for the last 14 years now. Matt, tell folks where they can talk football online with you, or where they maybe could reach you if they wanted a copy of the data.
Yeah, you can tweet me. I'm at Matt D. Simmons, Matt with 2 T's, Simmons spelled SIMMONDS. I don't tweet a lot. I don't have notifications on, but I will respond to you if you ask me something eventually. And I'm happy to email or whatever works best for them, the spreadsheet across. They can look at it, they can mess with it, they can tell me I'm an idiot, whatever it is they want to do.
I appreciate all the work you put into this. Clearly a ton of prep went into this, and I think some really good conclusions and some very interesting things that are unexpected about these past Super Bowl winners. Other folks out there, please hit me up if you'd like to be on a film study short. This is the time of the year to get your pre-draft franchise building thoughts out there. A lot of you have suggestions for that. Obviously, Matt is such a person. We're going to come back and talk about the defense in part 2 of this show, which will come up tomorrow on your timeline. Matt, but I really appreciate you taking the time to join us here. Thanks again for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Ken.
And we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.